Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you watch this in the world. I hope you guys are doing okay. So today we're going to be covering a bit of Tekken news, or a bit of Tekken controversy, and it's coming from a Pakistani player called Ahsan Ali. Now, Ahsan Ali, for those of you that don't know, is a very high-level Tekken player. One of the last times I actually saw him playing Tekken, he went right down to the wire of Arslan Ash, who is considered to be the best Tekken player in the world. So Ahsan Ali's skill is right up there. He's a pro Tekken player for Cyber Ninjas, and I believe he won the PPG Championships and the TS Showdown. So in terms of skill, this player is right up there. But he did post a tweet on Twitter that went viral, and I wanted to cover it, and I wanted to get your opinions. Now, I have my opinions on this, and I have my opinions on the people that have commented on it. So what he said was, the worst thing about Tekken 8 is that players who literally don't know how to play Tekken just before the release of Tekken 8 suddenly become strong players. It's like players who have skills and worked hard equals players with zero skills and zero hard work. So essentially what he's saying there is that Tekken 8 has lowered its skill ceiling down quite dramatically in comparison to Tekken 7. And so there are a lot of people that have never played Tekken before that have come in and are doing very, very well. This is the first time where pro players started complaining about the unfairness of Tekken 8 and want the balance patch ASAP. It's just been 2 months and it never happens before. We'll know the developers wants to sell their game more, that's why they make it easier. Now, I don't know how long Arshan has been playing, I don't know how long he's been playing fighting games, but there's been a reoccurring theme in fighting games for a very long time. I would say as far back as when Street Fighter 4 came to fruition, and that is, for lack of a better word, the dumbing down of fighting games. If you look at older fighting games, and this applies to Tekken as well, and you go further and further back, they tend to get harder and harder. If you ask a Tekken 5 veteran how they feel about Tekken 6, oh, they dumbed it down. If you ask a Tekken 6 veteran, how do you feel about Tekken 7? They dumbed it down. And now obviously you've got a lot of players, because Tekken 7 was super popular, that came from that game and made a name for themselves in that game playing Tekken 8 and realizing that Tekken 8 is a more dumbed down version of Tekken 7. Now, I do think with the inclusion of heat, it does add a little bit more complexity in terms of how mechanics work, because Tekken 8 shares all of Tekken 7's mechanics, or near enough all of its mechanics, with the added bonus, if you want to use that word, I know a lot of people don't like heat, of having to understand how heat works. But I would say largely that Tekken 8 is an easier game to play, it's an easier game to get into than Tekken 7. And I would say that has also helped the game sell a lot more and welcome in a lot of players. But that has its pros and cons. Now, he mentioned there that it's been 2 months and it's never happened before, and that a lot of pro players are asking for the balance patch. Now, I don't know again how long this individual has been playing Tekken, but the fact of the matter is that this is the first global release of Tekken ever. This is the first time Tekken has come to home consoles straight away, and so it hasn't sat in the arcades for 2 years. The arcade versions of Tekken games tend to be very broken. If we go back and we look at Tekken 7, there used to be a very popular YouTube channel called Green Arcade, and if you were fortunate enough to be watching the channel at that time, you would have seen how busted Tekken 7 was. And I would say that Tekken 7 on release was far, far worse than Tekken 8. If you think Akuma is bad now, I encourage you to go look at original footage of Akuma. The character was an absolute menace. Fight! And that might sound weird to say considering he's a menace now anyway. He was much, much stronger when Tekken 7 came out. So the job they've done with Tekken 8 on release, without this 2-year window to go through arcade and go through several balances before it gets to us, I think is actually pretty commendable. Is it perfect? No stretch of the imagination does anyone think that this game is anywhere near perfect in terms of balance, or just in general. Is it a very, very good effort? Yes, I would say so. I would say it's probably the best effort on release that I can remember, but we may differ on that. That's just in my opinion. That doesn't mean that it's perfect though, there's plenty of things that need to change. Rugged replies back, never happened before. This is literally what happened with all Tekken games the initially launched on arcade. And that is true. As I said, most Tekken games, if not all of them, have released in a worse state than this, and they have sat on the arcade for 2 years. So for those of you that are like, why is this game a little bit all over the place? It's because this is the first time that a game like Tekken of this scope, because don't forget it's astronomically bigger and harder to balance than Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat, has released on home console straight away. Usually what would be happening right now is we would be watching Tekken matches on arcade, and the only people that would have access to it are the Koreans and the Japanese. That's historically what has happened with Tekken. This person says, I do not agree with what you are saying, but even if you are right, it is the professional player who still wins. Then Max Gaming says, bro, you are now just being paranoid. Every Tekken has been easier than the previous one. Every new Tekken, people cry for patch ASAP. Secondly, the game isn't made for so-called pros only. It's a different game, accept it and move on. Now, let's touch on the first point there. Professional players always win. And this is a fair thing to say. In a game, even in Mortal Kombat, where I've taken the piss out of it quite a bit and I've been very critical of it, the better player will still win. So, for as much as I might want to talk shit, I'm well aware that somebody like Ninja Killer is far more skilled at the game and he'd probably destroy me. And that is true for any game that can be competitive. The better player will always win. The reason why the point kind of falls on its face is that what happens if you just evaluate the pro players? What happens when you just evaluate the people at the top? One thing that we saw with Tekken 6 in its early days, and I think even towards its end, but my memory is a little bit hazy, is that game was dominated by essentially three characters: Bob, Law, and Steve. And you most of the time saw Bob because he was extremely easy to use. Back then, Law was actually a difficult character to use. It was more of a high level character. Obviously now in Tekken 8 they've dumbed him down significantly. And Steve was also a bit more of a difficult character to use than Bob. So you would see a lot of Bobs. I remember watching the grand finals, it might have even been for an Evo, and it was just riddled with Bobs. And so what happens is when you insert dumb characters and you dumb the game down, yes, the better player will usually beat the mediocre player, or rather the professional player will beat the mediocre player. But when you get to the very top, you start to create this mess where everybody's picking the silly character or everybody's abusing the silly mechanics. And it turns into a situation where the fun in the game starts to get drowned out because people are just looking for the most effective way to win rather than picking a character where they can sort of express their playstyle and express how they want to use the character. And it does become a little bit annoying. For example, in Tekken 8, Asuzena's running attack where she gels you, the second hit is a high. So why you get gelled by it, I do not understand. You should be able to duck it and launch her. If you can't launch her, you should be able to get some sort of punish. She can essentially spam it on you. Now, Max Gaming said that every Tekken game has been easier than the previous one, and that is absolutely true. And that's one thing that I think people that have started with Tekken 7 and are coming into Tekken 8 need to remember. That Tekken 7 was easier to play than Tekken 6, and Tekken 6 was easier to play than Tekken 5. Tekken Tag 2 is the exception because of the abundance of mechanics and characters. That game actually became harder, and Tekken Tag 2 was essentially a Tekken 6.5 with a few added mechanics and characters. And on the point of this game isn't made for so-called pros only, he's absolutely right on that. I think that it's healthy to make a game that caters towards both. I think that when you make a game that caters towards one side too heavily, it causes problems, and I think that's something that you've seen with Mortal Kombat. Mortal Kombat, whilst it can of course be played by pros to a higher level, it's clearly made to appease the casuals. It's dumbed down to the point where anybody can pick up Mortal Kombat and within 5 minutes learn the hardest characters' combos or the hardest combos for their character. But on the flip side, you do need to make a game that appeases both. I think Street Fighter 6 has done a fantastic job of this. I do think Tekken 8's done a pretty good job. Obviously, we're still in Season 1. There's going to be a lot of balance patches. But I do hear the point that it's not just made for pros, and you can't just nerf things and balance things on the request of professional players. That doesn't mean that you can't put your opinion out there. Far be it from me to say don't ask for something. I'm always asking for things or suggesting things. So I don't think they should not suggest it. It's his Twitter page. He can say it if he wants to. But you have to acknowledge that the game needs to be made for everyone. And to be fair, I think Tekken's done a pretty good job of it. Another reason why you want to cater to both sides is that if you make a game that is easily accessible to the casuals, they will want to play enough that they might start to become interested in taking their skills to the next level. And so you open up a new pool for potentially professional or intermediate players. If you alienate casual players, then you lower the likelihood of people coming in and doing really well at the game or exploring the game at a higher level. So I think it's imperative for designers and people that are coding these games to make sure they don't alienate their existing fan base because they don't want them to go elsewhere. And also that's where you really get to see the complexities of the game, and you don't want to alienate the new fan base because they have a right to enjoy the game as well, and they could also potentially become players that take it to the next level. Troy says, if you feel this way, then you're just not as good as you think you are. Arshan replies, I don't feel this way, I've watched it every day on YouTube. Troy's point, I actually hate this point. I hate when people say this. Sometimes there is merit in that. Sometimes there is merit in saying that you're just not good at the game and you don't understand it. There's been plenty of instances where people don't understand how the game works and they get frustrated with it without understanding the fact that there's maybe 10 ways to figure out what they're having a problem with. And sometimes you're a very high level player like Arshan and you play against people like Arslan, Ash and Nee, who are the very highest level of players in Tekken, and still have this opinion. You can't put it down to, oh, who beat you, or maybe you're not as good as you think you are, when you're talking to a player like this. And this is not to blow smoke up his ass, because I don't know the guy, and quite honestly I don't care. The point is that if you recognize somebody that plays to an extremely high level and they're still complaining about the game, it's not to even say that their complaints are warranted, but you can't throw around you're not as good as you think you are. Sometimes it comes down to just having a very strong opinion on something, even if you're the world champion. Ahsan Ali has been critical of Tekken 8 as well. He's the best Tekken player on the planet. You can't turn around to him and say maybe you're just not as good as you think you are. It's not a really valid pushback in my opinion. It's a little bit of a cop out, and it's also a little bit childish. It works if you understand who you're talking to. If you're talking to somebody that you have observed to be very bad at the game or mediocre, then you can put that across. But obviously Ahsan is not that. Ahsan is probably better than all of us watching this video right now, if I'm being completely honest. Now that's also not to say that as a casual player you can't make your voice known. That's definitely not what I'm saying. I think if you have an opinion, you can put it out there. Of course, if you have an opinion that makes no sense, people are going to push back and say, hey, you don't actually know what you're talking about, and sometimes you'll be proven wrong. Bash goes on to say, trust me, the game is easier. Just made Fujin after 2 weeks. Never played Tekken 7. Wait till I'm 3 months in. I kind of half agree with this point. And the reason I half agree with it is that the game is very, very new. So everybody's jumped in at the same time. And I've made it to Bushin very quickly. I'm almost Tekken King. In Tekken 7, I struggled to get to Tekken King. I ended my Tekken 7 career on Tekken God. And that was right at the end of Tekken 7. And I struggled to get there. And I was playing Marduk. And Marduk carries players. I'm not ashamed to say that. When Marduk came out in Tekken 7, I identified, hey, this character is stupid and Tekken is very hard. How can I make my life easier? Now I was playing Feng Wei originally. And Feng Wei is not particularly hard. You just need to know all of his moves. So some characters you don't need to know all their moves. Feng Wei is like death by 1,000 cuts. But with Marduk, when I didn't want to play neutral anymore, I would just tackle you and start punching you and you had to guess. But that's just a quick side note. I don't want to deviate from the video too much, but when Marduk comes out, that's when the trolling begins. But because the game is brand new, everyone's packing at the same time, you're going to run into a lot of new players. Now you're going to run into a lot of good players that are in low ranks because it's brand new. But if you're lucky enough to get a lot of low ranking players, you can make it to Fujin quite quickly. So that doesn't really say that the game is easier. I think the game is objectively easier if you're talking about characters and how they function. I definitely feel the game is easier. I haven't been able to play a Mishima to the level that I'm playing them at right now. That's not to say it's a particularly good level, but I definitely feel a lot more comfortable playing Kazuya, for example, than I did in Tekken 7 or Tekken 6. Troy then says, not trying to undermine your achievements, but making it to Fujin only means you were smarter than the rest of the garbage in the rank climb. They made things easier here and there, yeah. You're not a strong player. Good shit though, gang. Then Bash says, I hate Twitter. That's my point. The shit is easier. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if Troy was reading that properly. That's basically what he was getting at. Going Out of Business says, so are you playing Tekken 8 and watching Tekken 8? Or is it a case of you and everybody else trying to play Tekken 7 even though this is the wrong game? Now that has been a criticism of a lot of people, that they're trying to play Tekken 8 the way you would play Tekken 7. Now of course there's loads of skills from Tekken 7 that are transferable to Tekken 8. But Tekken 8 is very much its own beast. Even the way you punish some things in this game are very, very different to Tekken 7. A good example of this is that I would have never have punished a power crush, for example, with a grab in Tekken 7, but in Tekken 8 that is a very, very good way to interrupt and guarantee some damage, especially if you've got some floor breaks. You're going for some maximum damage there. Grabs have been significantly buffed in this game to the point that they actually track you. That's probably why a lot of people have issues with King. Grabs didn't used to track in this game. They track now, and so King has become astronomically more annoying because of that, and I have no doubt that my boy Marduk is going to become more annoying. I can't wait to get my hands on him if you guys can't tell. But I do think a lot of people are playing Tekken 7 in Tekken 8, and that happens because a lot of people were playing Tekken 6 when they were playing Tekken 7, if you get what I mean. They were transferring those skills over, and whilst the basic skills do transfer over, it is a brand new game. This person says, well, are you just salty because you couldn't transfer your Tekken 7 skills directly to Tekken 8 and call it a day? Now these are like trolly comments. I wouldn't really entertain them. The get good comment does sometimes apply, but that's only if you're viewing match footage from somebody that literally does need to get good. The person that is commenting Ahsan is obviously one of the people that is right up there at the top, so that's a trolly comment. If I was him, I wouldn't really pay much attention to it. This person says, I'm sure they didn't become strong players with zero hard work. There may not be the same skill level, but you have to put in the work on Tekken. I do agree with that. I believe that if you're starting on Tekken 8, it can still be very daunting. It's very overwhelming. Players that already know what they're doing can come in and basically just rush you, and that can be very irritating for people. But it is objectively easier to jump into this game than it is Tekken 7. The heat system might add complexities to the mechanics, but overall I'd say it's easier. That doesn't mean it takes zero hard work though. That is bullshit. Ahsan says zero work means they started in Tekken 8 and haven't played the previous parts. That's a load of nonsense, bro. Because if you started in Tekken 7 and someone said zero work to you just because Tekken Tag 2 2 or Tekken 6 or Tekken 5 were much harder, that would undermine everything you're doing. At the end of the day, this is really a moot point because this is the game we're playing now. This is the game we're going to be playing for the next 10 years probably. So, you kind of have to get on board with it. The fact of the matter is that they will nerf characters over time and they will buff other characters, but the core mechanics are essentially going to stay the same. So you either suck it up or you go to another game. That is the harsh reality of the situation. Kami says that's not how it works. It's always about consistency. Players with skills that worked hard should never complain about this. If you are, you ain't as skilled as you think. That's a bullshit comment in my opinion. I think there's nothing wrong with pointing something out. I think there is a part of you that has to accept that you're in a new era and some things won't return to how they were in Tekken 7, but it doesn't necessarily mean that your skill is lower. This is a very stupid talking point that people come out with, especially when you're talking to somebody that is that high level. I'm sure like if you were talking to somebody with a more well-known name, for example, let's say Anakin. Anakin, as far as I can see, is the best Jack player. He was pretty much the best Jack player on Tekken 7, and I think he's probably the best Jack player on Tekken 8. If he came out and made a comment like this, you can't turn around to him as somebody that could never play on his level, or somebody that has viewed him playing, seeing him destroy people, go to the God of Destruction rank, and is likely going to be a finalist in both EVO Japan and Vegas EVO. I mean, I would be very surprised if he didn't make top 8 at this point after watching him play. You wouldn't walk up to him and say, it's because you're not as skilled as you think you are. That's a bullshit comment to make. Sometimes people can observe things, and even if they're very good at the game, they'll still complain. I don't think you should always put it down to get good. And also a comment like this, who cooked you, little bro? This is also either a trolley comment or from somebody that defaults to, you must have lost and that's why you're making this comment. There's plenty of examples you can pull from. I remember playing Soul Calibur 5 and I was pretty much the best Algor player in the UK for a very long time. And even I could see that Algor was stupid as hell. And I would have gone on Twitter and been like, yo, this Algor character is ridiculous. Now somebody might have come on there and gone, who cooked you? But it's just because I can see what's going on. I'm knowledgeable in the game and so I'm voicing my opinion. It's not always because people lost. Although I understand this is like a trolley comment, it's not meant to be taken seriously. Nico says, in my opinion, you mean to say that the overall learning curve has been completely disturbed due to the amount of broken characters this game has, but to be honest, you said it in a very bad way if that's what you mean. Because whatever you do, you cannot beat pros consistently with zero hard work and skill. Arshan replies saying, with all of these things, a player with almost zero skill can beat a pro. I don't agree with both of these comments. I think the conversation that Arshan should have put forth should have been in relation to pros playing pros, because you can get pro players, but skills obviously vary. And I think the skill gap will close if you have a lot of stupid characters in the game. A zero skill player cannot beat a pro player in Tekken 8. That won't happen. You have to be good at the game. If you take somebody that's new, let's just say they're in like the Shinryu rank, and you put them up against a Tekken Emperor, almost 10 times out of 10, the Tekken Emperor is going to win. So I don't know why Arshan would say that considering he is a knowledgeable player. That's just not true. He Who Vibes says, can you name who these players are that are suddenly doing well in tournament? Then Common Sense says that's the point. Before most people were not strong and now they are strong. If they feel strong, they will keep playing. It's not about making a good game, it's about getting as many players as possible. That's the goal. Marvel says Knee is still better than them. Long-time Tekken pros are still better than them. The people who are becoming good at Tekken 8 were good at other fighting games. What are you implying here? I do agree with that. I believe that Knee is still going to beat everybody that he was going to beat before. I don't think that's going to really change. This really affects the beginner to intermediate stages of the game. At the higher level, it will affect it. It will affect the character choices as well. I expect to see a lot of Asuzena because she's very simple to play and very effective. But the better player will usually win. I do think that there probably is an argument to say that a Devil Jin player that might have been struggling to close out the match in Tekken 7 may have an easier time in taking victories in Tekken 8 because Devil Jin has a shotgun heat smash. I think that's a fair argument to put forward. You don't necessarily have to even be winning tournaments. Sometimes the best player doesn't win the tournament. That really comes down to the brackets and the seeding. You imply that these new Tekken players have never played fighting games. Fighting game knowledge transfers from game to game. Sure, us new players don't know every minor detail about the roster and their moves, but we know frame data spacing and baiting. Y'all need to adapt. I kind of agree with the y'all need to adapt thing. I mean, it's a new game. At the end of the day, you can ask for changes and sometimes Harada will honor them. We saw Dragunov got a slight nerf and it was a justifiable nerf, and we're going to see nerfs and buffs across the board. Don't forget guys, this is season 1 of Tekken, and this is a season 1 that wouldn't have existed in Tekken 7 because Tekken 7 sat on the arcades for 2 years, so by the time that we got it on consoles, it was heavily patched. This is the most raw Tekken game that the globe has ever received, so you kind of have to take the good with the bad and just accept that for the first year at the very least, it's going to be a bit messy, easy, and we're going to be getting hit by a lot of shit that we otherwise think is a little bit silly. Fighting game knowledge does transfer from game to game. It transfers better from some other games. I would say fighting game knowledge from, say, Street Fighter transfers very well over to King of Fighters, in my experience anyway, and I think my time on Tekken really helped me on Virtua Fighter. It's not to say it took me to the top, but I definitely didn't feel as bunged down as some of my peers that were playing the game. But the easier argument is a fair and valid argument to bring up. I gave you guys the example of Marduk. I was playing Tekken 7 and I got to Tekken King with Feng Wei, and that was as far as I could get with Feng Wei. I really couldn't progress beyond that, and I could only touch Tekken King. Every time I would go into Tekken King, I would lose it. I'd go back up to it and I'd lose it. Then I chose Marduk, and I got to Tekken King so quickly. And this was on a fresh account, brand new account. It wasn't carried over, didn't have ranks that were given to me by Feng Wei. And I went to Tekken God. Now yes, getting the actual Tekken God rank was a little bit more difficult, because when you get to those ranks, you're playing very, very difficult players. And sometimes it can be the luck of the draw. Luckily, I came across another Tekken God Heihachi player, and I managed to beat him. That was very, very rough. I'll never forget that match. I still have PTSD. But Marduk carried me to that Tekken God. And there are characters in this game that are allowing people to do things that they would have never have been able to do before. You do have to kind of accept it because we're in a new era, but it's fair to say that some characters do carry people. I don't know why people are ashamed to admit this. I've played boss characters mainly in my time in fighting games. I played Black Adam in Injustice, who was stupidly powerful. In Injustice 2, Black Adam was probably the best character in the game. And I knew that having those added bonuses that other characters didn't get to enjoy were definitely helping me in the fight. I played Algo in Soul Calibur 5, another absurd character. Would I have won as many tournaments playing Nightmare? I don't think so. I gelled very well with Algo. I was using him better than the other people using Algo in the UK at the time. I do think my Algo was special, but on the same time, Algo has some ridiculous tools to the point where you couldn't even walk backwards or he would catch you in a combo. You heard that correctly. If you step backwards against Algo, he can press back A and B and you appear in a chair, and that combo does about 70% of your health if Algo has full meter. So it's unfair to really say that characters don't carry people. Of course they do. There's certain characters in this game that are carrying the load for certain players, and you shouldn't take that as a put down. I embrace it. I embrace that shit. If I can find a character that I really like and they're powerful, we're singing. We're having a good time. I don't really care what people say. I know that Marduk carried me to Tekken God. I know without Marduk I wouldn't have gone beyond Tekken King. I wasn't good enough to get there. Just embrace it. So what he's saying is half true. I agree with him, but at the same time he has to accept it. He has to accept that this is the Tekken game. It's dumbed down. There's a lot more silliness in this game. There's a lot more anime shit. Like, I think Alisa players are carried. I can't stand Alisa players. If you play Alisa, you can comment in the comment section so I can start flaming you when I upload this video. I can't stand Alisa. No, I'm joking. I'm not going to flame you, but I can't stand the character. Xiao Yu plays, for example. You might want to say they're carried because they just literally go under lows. Xiao Yu literally goes under some lows. So I kind of don't use the argument anymore when I lose to somebody, oh, it's because you're carried. At the end of the day, if I believe that somebody is carried by a character, then why am I not using the character, right? If I care about winning and losing that much, if that's your mindset, now that's not my mindset. My mindset is play what's the most fun. It just happened to be Marduk. I just happened to pick him and think, wow, this character's dumb and he is a great, great time. And if he ever comes out in Tekken 8, I'm sure he's going to make loads of people quit the game. But I wanted to show you guys those quick screenshots and get your opinions on that. What do you think about Ahsan's take on Tekken 8? Do you think it has been dumbed down from Tekken 7? Do you think it's a bit of a moot point because all Tekken games get dumbed down, as do all fighting games? And if you do think it's been dumbed down, do you think it's been dumbed down to the point where it's becoming too annoying for you? How do you feel about the heat mechanic? A lot of people are very, very wishy-washy on it right now. I know that I'm not particularly chuffed about it, but I do believe that we're going to get heavy nerfs to the heat mechanic and there'll be a greater emphasis on neutral play. I believe that Namco has probably made it so powerful to bring in new players to make them feel comfortable, and then when the game starts to thin out and people have had their fill of Tekken 8 and the regulars stick around, I think that's when balance patches are going to come in, and that's when things are going to get a little bit more normalized and less crazy. But I could be wrong. This could just be a new era of Tekken where it's much more anime. Anyways guys, thank you so much for watching the video. Thank you once again for everyone that tuned into the live stream. We will be doing another one. Details on that very soon. There will be more tournaments and hopefully more prizes. But for now, I'll catch you guys very soon. Take care and peace.